This was the first industrial revolution in the history of bicycle racing. The man flipped the handlebars upward. Then he leaned forward into a prone position to ride. Unexpectedly, this small change significantly increased the speed. In just a moment, he overtook the fellow cyclist who had started ahead. But the man was not satisfied with this. In order to create even greater speed, he immediately took apart the only washing machine in his house. Then he took the 1,200 revolutions per minute bearings from it and installed them into the wheels. He then collected steel pipes from a scrapyard, first compressing them to a uniform size, then performing precise welding. Finally, after 29 days of assembly, the world's first TT bicycle was successfully created. However, it was met with skepticism from friends, because the man actually dreamed of relying on this piece of junk to break the world record for the 1-hour track cycling event. You have to realize, professional racing bikes cost no less than £500,000, and they are all meticulously designed by computers. In contrast, this pile of scrap metal he cobbled together wouldn't even fetch 50 yuan if he tried to sell it. Yet, no one could have imagined that he would actually rely on this piece of junk worth less than 50 yuan to break the world record twice, becoming the true Flying Scotsman. This true inspirational story will surely allow you, who are anxious and lost, to find the motivation to keep going. The boy's name was Graeme, because he was weak and sickly in his youth. He became, in the eyes of those bullies, a target they could bully at will. Every time after church prayers, because he couldn't run fast enough, he would be surrounded and intercepted by the bad guys, suffering humiliation and abuse time and time again. Even Christmas Eve was no exception. His father, a naval captain, wanted to stand up for him, but Graeme didn't even have the courage to point them out. Seeing this, his father could only say, "You must learn to face them bravely." To help his timid son escape the torment of bullies, his father, who was away for work most of the time, tried giving him a bicycle. Unexpectedly, the gears of fate began to turn from that moment on. Since then, the bicycle seemed to have attached a pair of wings to his legs, carrying him away from the shadows and bullying of his childhood. 10 years of time faded the childishness from his face, and also made the bicycle his only passion and confidant. Graeme's activities outside of work were participating in various cycling events. Although the explosive power of his legs was mediocre, his lasting endurance forged one glory after another for him in competitions. And this was all thanks to his profession, compared to those amateur racers. As a bicycle courier, he clearly had more time to practice cycling. In addition, he also ran a second-hand bike shop that was on the verge of bankruptcy, but due to suppression by competitors, his shop was often deserted. The occasional customer only wanted to take advantage of him. For example, for a bicycle priced at 300, the old man only wanted to pay 200. But Graeme not only didn't haggle, he even thought about helping the other party deliver it to their door. But the old man said, "You riding a bike to deliver it definitely won't be faster than me driving." This immediately ignited Graeme's competitive spirit. He made a bet with the old man. "If I arrive first by bike, then the other party must buy the bike at the original price. Conversely, I will give it to them for free." Faced with this surefire deal, the customer readily agreed. So, with a priest as a witness on the side, a speed duel between a bicycle and a car began. At first, the car maintained a lead. However, at a red light intersection, eager to win, Graeme chose to take a risk, gaining himself over 10 seconds of pedaling time. After that, Graeme remained in the lead. Looking at the spirited young man in front of him, and the unstoppable bicycle, the priest believed Graeme might not necessarily be defeated. But the customer thought that having regained the lead, he had already won this test of speed and courage. But just as the finish line was in sight, Graeme suddenly sped over from another intersection, catching the car owner off guard. Although knocked to the ground by the car, the fruits of victory seemed to have the ability to dissipate the pain. The old man grumbled and scolded him for valuing money over his life, but still admitted that he was slightly inferior. The priest greatly admired the reckless and determined young man before him. In him, he saw the vitality of his own youth. But after just a handshake, Graeme hurried away, because he had to handle a full day of work next. While waiting for the post office to open, Malky, also a courier, recognized Graeme at a glance, because at that time, he was the British 1-hour cycling record holder. But Graeme humbly replied, "Don't I still have to make a living like everyone else?" After saying that, he enthusiastically shared his sandwich. But the orange marmalade spread inside made it hard for Malky to swallow. This was simply a desecration of food. Graeme just said lightly, "This sugar can sustain me for a full day of work." It seems that even a national record holder has to be frugal for the daily necessities of life. After work, the two like-minded people rode together in the breezy mountains and rested under the lush ancient trees. The breeze swept across the lake, blowing away the fatigue of the day. At this time, Malky took out a magazine, which featured a report on the famous British cyclist Boardman, who would attempt to break the 1-hour track record in 9 weeks. That was a record that had been sealed for 9 years. Once the challenge is successful, it will surely go down in history. Thinking back to when he had ridden alongside Boardman, Graeme also had the idea of challenging the world record. But even if he pushed his physical fitness to the limit, he was still very far from the world record. Unless he could create a brand new way of riding, or develop an unprecedented piece of cycling equipment. Just as he was deep in thought, a loose screw on the handlebars gave him a sudden inspiration. So he tentatively flipped the handlebars to face upward, and then imitated a skiing posture to ride while lying on the bike. Unexpectedly, this small change brought about a significant increase in speed. But this was only the first step in Graeme's development of new equipment. In the evening, he and Malky went to the scrapyard again to collect discarded materials. Unexpectedly, this act of petty theft was caught on the spot by the priest. However, he did not judge the two. Instead, he thoughtfully returned the parts that fell off during their escape. The priest was curious about what they needed these useless scraps for. GLA explained that he was going to build a new type of bicycle. He used his hands and feet to explain the principles of the new bike. When skiing, to reduce drag, professional athletes lean forward according to aerodynamics. And this principle of drag reduction also applies to the design of the bike frame. He said confidently, once a new bike is finished, he would break the world record. But Mikey raised his own doubts at this point. First, building the bike requires a large expense to buy a large amount of materials. Second, they have no place to build a bike. Third, challenging the record requires renting a world-class indoor racing venue. The costs involved are far beyond what GLA's meager salary can support. However, with high aspirations, GLA had already decided to overcome these obstacles. He begged Mikey to act as his agent, to find sponsors and solve the third problem, while he would collect old materials to solve the first problem. And the kind priest, after seeing his determination and courage, decided to offer his small warehouse to provide a place for GLA to build the bike. He believed that investing in a young person's dream could make his own aging days shine again. Just like that, all three problems had a solution. GLA decided to break the world record 1 week before Boardman. For this, he immediately threw himself into the construction of the new bike. Every compression is a precious step on the road to building a dream. Every weld is a clear footprint of an ideal blooming. Every moment of focus is the most beautiful scenery to look back on for the rest of one's life. And to have more time for cycling training, GLA simply quit his job as a postman and used all his remaining energy to train his physical fitness. His legs moved non-stop. Sweat poured onto the ground. Also, the ideal in his heart would no longer be out of reach. Compared to the shared goals of the priest and Mikey, GLA was even more grateful for his wife's understanding. Not only did she not hold a grudge against GLA's all-in gamble, but she also said she would work overtime at the hospital to earn more subsidies and would accompany her husband to train after work. Meeting of souls is a lifelong poetry. Mutual reliance is a rare expectation of time. Having such a partner who resonates on the same frequency, I think, is the love that every man dreams of. On the other side, Mikey also dressed himself in a suit, using the title of general manager of a private management company, to meet with various bosses. But because he had been delivering mail in the area for years, he was recognized by the front desk every time as a postman, and was ruthlessly turned away. The repeated failures made him a bit discouraged. But fortunately, hard work pays off. One day, he met his middle school classmate on the road, who introduced him to a parking lot owner. But as soon as they met, the owner couldn't wait to strip naked. This scared the life out of Mikey, who had never been in a relationship. He thought he was going to be taken advantage of here. But fortunately, the other person was just changing into cycling gear. And he didn't have any strange habits. As a cycling fanatic, the owner, upon learning that GLA was also a Scot, is the record holder for the British 1-hour cycling record. And after the ideal of breaking the world record and creating new glory, agreed very readily to be their exclusive sponsor. While Mikey was successful, Graeme also never stopped designing the new bike. But a sudden problem still made him struggle. Where on earth should he look for bearings that could withstand high-speed rotation? Lost and confused, he sat by the lake feeling defeated, and his mood inevitably hit rock bottom. The priest asked him why he looked so dejected, and Graeme explained that he has a few days every month where he falls into a slump. But fortunately, he quickly pulled himself out of that state. Deep in thought at home, staring at the high-speed spinning washing machine, a bold idea suddenly popped into his mind. When his wife came home from work, she was surprised to find her husband taking apart the only washing machine in the house, just to take out the 1,200 revolutions per minute bearings to install in the bike wheels. But when the priest learned of this, he did not praise his intelligence, but instead remarked that Graeme was lucky to have a wife who supported him. After a period of assembly, this bizarre bike made entirely of scrap materials was finally born. Graeme named it Old Faithful, symbolizing an ancient faith. Because there was no professional cycling track nearby, they had no choice but to take a risk and test ride it on a flat road with heavy traffic. After some pedaling, Graeme thought, although the new bike had flaws, the overall condition was not bad. But Mikey, his friend and manager, felt that this unsightly piece of junk had no chance of winning. For God's sake, Graeme. Boardman's superbike. Cost £500,000. And it was designed by a computer. What is this thing of yours? Are you going to use this pile of junk and washing machine parts to break a record that has existed since before they were even manufactured? I worked hard to overcome all difficulties to get sponsorship. Yet Graeme spent a lot of time only to piece together an old piece of junk. This made it hard for Maki to accept for a moment. But Graeme retorted. The new bike was built entirely according to the laws of physics. And every detail has its corresponding scientific basis. Although it looks old, its performance is not inferior to a professional racing bike. The two, refusing to give in to each other, had a heated argument on the side of the road. However, the difference in opinion did not affect their friendship. They still continued as always to move towards their common goal. Graeme continued to focus on his training, while Maki booked the cycling track at the Norwegian stadium and used the sponsorship money to book tickets in advance. When the gears of time reached the 8th week, the long-sealed record welcomed a new challenger. Just as Graeme was preparing to assemble Old Faithful, Maki showed him a surprise. He convinced the sponsor to replicate a new Old Faithful 1-to-1, because the original piece of junk didn't look reliable at all. But Graeme just tapped the frame and concluded that the materials used in this bike are heavier than the classic one, will inevitably affect the speed while riding. But if it is possible to break the record with this new bike, then the sponsor will cover the expenses for the entire coming year. In order not to let down the kindness of friends, and also for a more distant future, GRA finally decided to set out on the new bike. Wanting to break the world record, GRA needs to ride 205 laps continuously within 1 hour. The 51-kilometer journey is a great test for the body. As the timer starts, carrying great ambitions, GRA, who came from thousands of miles away, officially begins the challenge. Behind are the cheers of the wife. Ahead is the endless cycle of the track. The speed of the bike gets faster and faster as the number of laps increases, like a streak of red lightning speeding by, flying on the track. If this speed is maintained, then the creator of the world record will be the name. But as time passes, the disadvantage of the bike's weight gradually appears. Sweat beads also wet the cheeks at this moment. What's worse is the terrifying whispers accompanying childhood trauma take advantage of the moment when the body is near its limit, making the exhausted mind unable to concentrate fully. Looking at the little time remaining, and the 3 laps left to go, Mike can almost conclude this attempt will end in failure. Sure enough, when the 1-hour time is up, GRA ultimately fails the challenge by a margin of 2 laps. Although this result has set a new personal best, but for GRA, whose goal is the world record, it is a complete failure. This is another complete failure. Don't look at me like that, GRA. Don't think like that. Don't think like that, GRA. Under the constant soothing of the wife's gentle whispers, GRA finally managed to calm down. In fact, for the past 10 years, never having escaped the shadow of being bullied in childhood, it was just the wife's gentleness that covered it up in daily life. And to completely overcome the fear brought by childhood trauma, it is necessary to have an earth-shattering victory to prove oneself. This is also the real reason for wanting to challenge the world record, since the venue rental time is 24 hours. Therefore, before noon tomorrow, GRA still has the opportunity to challenge again. The time for the rematch is set for 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. But to do it in a short time, another high-intensity ride, is a huge challenge for the body's functions. In order to prevent leg muscle stiffness, every 2 hours, there is a warm-up, striving to, before the second challenge, maintain the best physical state. And on the other side, Mike did not sleep all night. Spent the whole night reassembling the classic bike. Because Mike believes that for this failure, there is half the responsibility. Time comes to the second day. GRA, having regrouped, rides the reassembled bike. Gets on the track again. The staff advises against humiliating oneself, but GRA ignores the doubts of others. Just sets off forward again without hesitation. Go for it, Graeme. Striving is the resilience of keeping one's original intention after experiencing failure. Courage is the persistence of riding head down, fearless of wind and rain. Enterprising is the determination to cross mountains and ridges in pursuit of dreams. And the combination of these three is the inner driving force for a cyclist to forge ahead. In the first half hour of the ride, Graeme, in hot form, was a full lap ahead of the world record. But as his stamina gradually faded, the nightmare of childhood trauma occupied his mind again. But this time, the cheers of his wife and Malky echoing through the venue had a surprisingly effective effect in dispelling this fear. With 2 shots from the starter, Graeme officially entered the final sprint stage. At that time, he was still a full lap ahead of the world record. But at the same time, his physical strength had reached its limit. What kept him maintaining his pedaling frequency was only the determination to reach the pinnacle, and an indestructible willpower. On this endless circular track, only by experiencing the most painful persistence Can one be worthy of the tribute of flowers and applause at the finish line? In the end, relying on the superb performance of the classic bike and his own perseverance, Graeme successfully broke the record that had been sealed for 9 years. The £4,000 in prize money and a full year of sponsorship were enough for them to temporarily escape a life of scrimping and saving. But when everyone was celebrating wildly, Graeme hid alone in a dark corner. Malky did not understand why he wanted to hide himself. Only his wife knew that Graeme was facing those low moods alone. These intermittent bad moods all stemmed from the shadow of being bullied in childhood. Later, people named this symptom depression. As time reached the 9th week, renowned cyclist Boardman also, as originally reported, challenged the 1-hour cycling world record as scheduled. Friends were all watching whether the record Graeme had just set would be broken. Yet he himself appeared completely indifferent, just riding on the street as usual, but ended up encountering a flat tire accident. Helplessly, he had to go to a bar to borrow a phone, to call family or friends to pick him up. But he ran into the bully from his childhood unexpectedly. "What are you back for, champion? Back just to show off to us, right? Get lost." Graeme didn't want to pay attention to these good-for-nothing losers. But they, just like 10 years ago, blocked him at the entrance of the bar. But this time, Graeme did not escape. Instead, he chose the courage to resist. The fierceness radiating from his whole body also made the thugs freeze in place, not daring to make a move easily. "You damn well look at me. Because this will be the most meaningful thing you have ever done." People cannot always be trapped in the past. Life is like a bicycle, always moving forward. What one really needs to learn is to boldly face the fears of the past, walk out of the quagmire and bravely turn the page, to rush towards more worthwhile mountains and seas. Meanwhile, after an hour of chasing, Boardman, without any suspense, broke the record Graeme had set a week ago. The honor of world's fastest changed hands again, making Graeme inevitably feel a bit dimmed. But his unyielding personality drove him to decide to participate in the short-distance pursuit race 5 weeks later, determined to compete with Boardman. Although his specialty is in the field of endurance racing, although his own bike was low cost, while Boardman's high-tech one was worth $500,000, and even fitted with carbon fiber, Graeme felt no fear at all, because he had a secret weapon. That was his self-invented tuck-in skiing riding posture. As this 4-kilometer pursuit race began, Graeme took the lead and was the first to get into the zone, while Boardman was not to be outdone and followed closely behind. This pursuit race was not just about raw strength, but also the determination to win shown during the performance. As Graeme's face became increasingly strained, his pedaling frequency reached its limit. The gears roared like a trapped beast, and the chain spun rapidly like a dancing silver snake. What an amazing moment. 4:22.668. Another world record for Graeme Obree. He is the new champion. In the end, Graeme defeated Boardman with a 2.38-second lead, reaching the pinnacle once again, and he broke the world record for the 4-kilometer ride. But his opponent, Boardman, was not furious, but was deeply impressed by his strength. He stood on the podium, enjoying the crowning glory. But the president of the Cycling Association did not seem satisfied with this. When Graeme returned to his country, he received a warm welcome from the Scottish people, not only because he set a new world record, but also because he defeated the Englishman Boardman in the race. For this, the local mayor awarded him the title of Flying Scotsman. But just as everyone was celebrating wildly, the Cycling Association was discussing how to sanction Graeme. If a piece of junk costing less than £50 could set a world record, then how would bicycle manufacturers sell their expensive yet impractical products? This would directly affect their own interests. So, in the end, the association used Graeme's on to directly ban him from competing. Facing the association's high-sounding sanctions, Graeme went straight to the media to show off his new bike. This humorous way of fighting back. And the association's top brass began to sanction Graeme even more severely. They kept changing the competition rules, but Graeme could always find a way to counter the association's unscrupulous difficulties. The saddle length could not exceed 5 centimeters, so he sought off a piece on the spot to make it meet the standard. The bike parts had to be commercially available, so he went to find replaceable parts from civilian bikes. Every new rule the association made was unexpectedly broken by Graeme. Finally, the helpless association had to allow Graeme to return to the track, but place new restrictions on his signature riding posture. The association stipulated that riders were not allowed to by the race, otherwise 3 riders should be immediate disqualification. This was undoubtedly putting shackles on the wings of the Flying Scotsman at the World Championship qualifiers, even though Graeme was already very restrained. But he was still caught twice for violations by the sharp-eyed referee. In the end, unable to adapt to the new rules, he fell heavily from his bike. GLA has fallen, and he fell badly. The once proud world record holder suffered a crushing defeat in the current qualifiers. This made him unable to accept such an outcome for a moment. The sense of frustration deep in his mind swept over him once again. Depressed, he watched the race footage over and over again, and drank alcohol to numb his mind, sip after sip. At this moment, the shadows of his childhood added insult to injury. The misfortune of having been bullied in the past, along with the failure in the race, at this moment, became weapons for others to humiliate him. Compared to physical harm like punches and kicks, this kind of verbal psychological attack was clearly more damaging. Amidst the constant mockery and intimidation, GLA's briefly healed mental illness flared up again. An indescribable pain spread throughout his body. Unable to bear the torture, he acted on impulse and went to a remote mountain forest, wanting to end his life there. As it turned out, the rope was of poor quality and suddenly snapped, allowing him to be saved by a passing cyclist. Afterward, his wife wanted to find the best psychiatrist to treat him, but he said he would solve the lingering problems in his own way. However, his so-called way was just pure avoidance. He locked his grand ideals in an abandoned shed, letting his past efforts sleep in a dark corner, no longer pursuing the poetry and distance in his heart, returning to being that unknown postman. But life is not just about hitting rock bottom. There is also the unexpected kindness of others. When the Norwegian stadium was renovating the track, they specifically gave one of the track fragments to this record breaker. While commemorating his historic achievement, it also served to inspire that dejected soul. And the first letter he delivered after returning to being a postman was a deliberate arrangement by the pastor. Now he has decided to follow a merchant ship to ride the waves, to let life be young once more. And at this moment of parting, he wants to help GLA one last time. During the conversation, the pastor spoke frankly without reservation that his late wife suffered from the same depression as him. She was trampled by life without restraint, peeled away layer by layer by loneliness, and shattered time and again by illusions, until in the darkness, she desperately ended her own life. I think perhaps, if we had been together longer, maybe I could have changed all of this. Actually, we could talk about it too. What's the use of talking? Have you ever talked about it before? Then why do you think it's meaningless? It makes me feel like I have no value. Like a piece of trash who has accomplished nothing. So what? It doesn't matter. Life is like the first time you ride a bike. As long as you keep riding forward, it will be fine. Life is like the first time you ride a bike. As long as you keep moving forward, it will be fine. The pastor's words made GLA start to re-examine himself, uncovering the long dusty fabric. The partner who fought side by side had never left. Beside the bed, his wife's companionship was always there. In the corner of the table, the superhero father in his son's drawing was heroic and fearless. These supportive factors everywhere in life made GLA realize how wrong the idea of just leaving was. And it also made him start to regain his confidence. Prepare to face the illness positively. Perhaps you could help me arrange a psychologist at the hospital. Sure, I can do that. To become a Superman father in his son's heart. To not let down his wife's years of waiting. To not waste the kindness of the pastor and Malky along the way. And to become a real man again. Graeme finally decided to overcome the obstacles once more. He was determined to win the championship again to prove himself. Once the intention is set, nothing can stop him. For this, he actively prepared for the World Championship a year later. The media scrambled to report the news of his return. As the winds of time blew across the long river of history, a year later, Graeme stood on the stage of the World Championship again. Now, all he had to do was forget all the burdens and become that stubborn, foolish person he once was. To cope with the association's rule restrictions, this time Malky installed a cushion on the handlebars in advance. This way, his chest would never touch his hands. Before the race, his wife wished him success from the stands. The people of Scotland watched intently in front of their televisions. The pastor prayed silently by the radio. With the sound of the starting gun, the race officially began. Facing the previous World Championship winner, Graeme had no fear at all, because his opponent had always been his own timid and cowardly self from the past. This man who rose from the depths of life's adversity, the reborn Flying Scotsman, had now become a spiritual pillar for countless cycling enthusiasts. Those setbacks that failed to completely crush him only made him stronger today. Those heartbreaking sufferings of the past had all turned into endless strength beneath his feet. Those moments of heartbreak when he struggled alone without support would all vanish forever under the crushing of the wheels. He pedaled forward with all his might, determined to put a perfect full stop to his past fears. Passing through the nightmare-like forest, passing through the shackle-like swamp, passing through the fog-like wilderness, and also passing through the childhood shadows deep in his memory. In the last 2 laps, his wife closed her eyes. The pastor held his breath. Graeme gave it his all. Finally, this comeback Flying Scotsman had once again created a miracle in the cycling world. He walked into the cheering crowd, enjoying his own coronation of glory. Under the focus of countless lenses, he left the names of the 3 most important people in his life forever on the classic bike. The pastor, about to set off on a long journey, raised his glass. A toast to Graeme. A toast to himself. The high-ranking association official who had once made things difficult for him was also conquered by his strength at this moment. This is a true story. In the life of Graeme Obree, he broke the world record twice and won the world championship twice. He is the well-deserved Flying Scotsman. Although he once fell into a deep valley of despair, suffering could never stop his steps forward. Perhaps as the pastor said, life is like a bike ride. As long as you keep moving forward, you will be fine. Because there is no pain in life that cannot be healed, and no downfall that cannot be ended. Everything lost will return in another way. And there is no road in the world without turns. The road to success is destined not to be flat and wide. And achieving one's dreams cannot be smooth sailing. But flowers bloom and fade, tides rise and fall. Everything has an end. In this cycling race of life, as long as you can keep persisting, even if the road is rough and difficult, our future will still be bright. Even if the flower of hope withers in the cold winter, as long as you hold on to the hope that sweetness follows bitterness, the next spring, it will surely bloom even more brilliantly. Do not be afraid of 10,000 people blocking the way, only fear giving up yourself.